eso de la generación de la maestría y de una relación fuerte de la maestría y de la universidad con la escuela europea, donde estaba de Sussex, la gente de Manchester, después Maastricht, o sea, con todo el grupo europeo. De hecho, muchos de los docentes, ahora docentes, profesores, con carreras excelentes recientemente, estudiaron ahí y tomaron el doctorado ahí. Así que Giovanni en algún modo viene este último, no digo a ver un poco y a traer sus trabajos y su historia más reciente, y en algún modo para dar también un mensaje de visibilidad a todo lo que se hizo acá y se va a pensar seguir haciendo. Bueno, su currículum, Giovanni estudió, uno lo mira y piensa que estudió economía, no estudió economía, empezó estudiando filosofía. Luego el doctorado sí lo hizo en economía y tuvo la posibilidad de trabajar en ese momento con el grupo inicial del SPRU, donde estaba Chris Friedman, Kirk Pavik, Nifon Tunzeman, todo ese equipo ahí que empezó a generarse esa escuela que tuvo mucho que ver con el pensamiento de la tecnología y la innovación, digamos en un sentido no mainstream, en un sentido mucho más amplio y en algún modo con una visión distinta. El contacto de Sussex con el contacto con Estados Unidos, digo, el profesor Tiss, Nelson, Winter, todo es una red que se forma y es una red que queda incluso vinculada a todo este equipo que estuvo acá trabajando sobre los temas de innovación y tecnológica. Giovanni hace el doctorado ahí, en esa tesis, en ese momento trabaja, ¿cómo se llama tu relator?
Supervisor Kuczynski y Kaldor.
Kaldor y Kuczynski eran sus supervisors en la tesis. Así que viene una historia de la vieja economía, de la economía que por lo menos nosotros de mi edad conocemos, no sé si los jóvenes saben que existió, pero que en algún modo representa eso. Y la relación institucional con este grupo nace con la venida en algún modo de Giovanni por la primera vez aquí, gracias a Gabriela y Giovanni vine yo también, y se generó todo este tipo de relación que creo que es una relación importante y que espero que siga con el tiempo. Giovanni luego ganó el profesor de investigador en Venecia y luego profesor, pasó directamente a profesor titular en Roma y luego hace 25, 26 años empieza con la iniciativa de crear un departamento de economía, un instituto de economía a la Universidad de Pisa. La Universidad de Pisa crea el Instituto de Economía con recursos y es un instituto de economía que hoy tiene
Scuola Sant'Anna.
Scuola Sant'Anna, no Pisa, Scuola Sant'Anna en Pisa. Y en esa escuela hoy es una de las más reconocidas y tiene una cotación en Europa muy alta, o sea, por fondos, por investigación y por publicaciones. Formó y tiene un doctorado que es de mucho prestigio. De hecho, si tenemos tiempo después, me gustaría que les contara un poquitito cómo hacen ellos para generar los que estudian los doctorados, las cátedras, los cursos, los proyectos de investigación. Giovanni publicó, ustedes lo conocen, me imagino que los más jóvenes han leído los papers sobre paradigmas tecnológicos, trayectorias. Giovanni tiene un primer libro del 1984, que es un libro de economía industrial, donde en la primera parte, es parte de su tesis, tiene el tema de los paradigmas y las trayectorias, luego tiene un ejemplo muy interesante, que es el ejemplo de cuando era el cambio entre la válvula, el diodo, a los transistores, a los semiconductores. Digamos, el tema de la generación de los semiconductores entre Japón y Estados Unidos, las leadership que se dieron en ese momento. Y después tiene un modelo de economía industrial, que diría que es uno de los modelos más interesante, que pone el análisis de lo que es el oligopolio, estructura de mercados y cambio tecnológico. Una última parte que se dedica al crecimiento y a la macro. Luego publica otro libro importante, que fue el libro de Comercio Internacional con Dosi, Pavit y Soete. Y ahí tiene una cantidad de libros que no los voy a citar. El último texto es The Foundation on Evolving Complex Economy, que es un libro de complexity y es lo que se usa ahora como manual micro-macro en muchas de las escuelas. Eso lo va a presentar Giovanni en el primer día de la escuela que vamos a hacer para América Latina, el día lunes en el Rectoría General, en una conferencia a las 4 de la tarde. Ahí presenta el modelo más analítico, el texto, lo que hay en el texto y por qué, cuáles son las líneas de investigación que se están marcando. Y el otro tema importante que me gustaría poner sobre el terreno es lo que siempre hemos pensado con Giovanni cuando nos reuníamos, es que uno puede hacer todos los papers que quiere, puede hacer, pero si no tiene incidencia en las publicaciones, si no tiene incidencia entre los que lo leen, si no tiene impacto, uno puede contarse lo que quiera, lo puede leer el paper su mamá, su papá, su novia, su amante, pero el impacto uno se lo cuenta a sí mismo. Entonces, una de las cosas que más pensamos históricamente es que toda esta escuela tenía que tener alto impacto en los indicadores para que sean leíbles y consultables. Giovanni formó muchos jóvenes que tienen alto impacto en lo que hacen. Él mismo tiene, lo cité hoy en Google Scholar, 90.000 citaciones. 90.000 citaciones es un número, diría que un poco alto, y un índice, el H índice tiene de 110. Y recibió muchísimos premios. Así que en ese sentido, diría que el tipo de escuela que se generó cuando se quiso generar algo de alternativo, y eso quiero ser muy sincero con ustedes, y me parece un mensaje para los jóvenes de acá, que uno no es alternativo porque se la cuenta a sí mismo, es alternativo porque tiene un impacto en lo que hace hacia afuera. Si uno piensa que la innovación no es lineal, es porque tiene impacto afuera. Si uno piensa que la macro va a manejar, es porque tiene impacto afuera. Si uno hace teoría es porque tiene impacto afuera. Entonces el nivel de publicaciones me parece importante. Giovanni, y cierro con esto, ha hecho este último trabajo que fue presentado cuando él cumplió ahora 70 años en la Universidad de Pisa, que lo nombraron profesor emérito, se nombra dignamente la presidencia. En ese momento, el momento después se lanzó este libro y ahora sigue publicando artículos. Hay 2 artículos recientes que aconsejo, un artículo que se publicó recientemente sobre economía industrial y que creo que es un buen mensaje. También todo lo que hemos hecho sobre economía industrial, acá con una citación. Ahora todo el mundo habla de política industrial. Con nosotros hicimos el libro con Giovanni Dosi, con Stiglitz, Dosi, yo y Nelson. Ese libro que hicimos lo hicimos en el 2010, y ahí no se hablaba de política industrial. Al contrario, se hablaba de política industrial, te tiraban algo en la cabeza, eras el malo, el que no entendió, el que no era un buen economista. Nos parece estamos muy contentos que todos lo siguen publicando ahora sobre ese tema, es un tema que salió del closet y está afuera, pero creo que en eso hemos dado batallas importantes. Y el tema de la macro, la gestión de la macro, la relación entre lo que es macro y teoría schumpeteriana estructural, o sea, digamos, teoría de la innovación, o sea, cómo se pone esa micro con esa macro. Bueno, yo no voy a seguir hablando, Giovanni va a presentar un trabajo, a los que quieren, la parte más analítica, más teórica, va a estar en la reunión para los estudiantes en Rectoría General, ahí va a haber, vamos a tener una escuela de 30 personas que vienen de toda América Latina, y obviamente va a estar abierto, va a estar transmitido, se puede ver, y ahí va a ser más analítica sobre el libro de los recientes avances en la teoría evolutiva. La presentación que va a hacer hoy Giovanni tiene mucho más que ver con el contexto político. O sea, en este momento uno cómo piensa que se pueden hacer políticas progresistas, o sea, cómo se pueden hacer políticas que tengan digamos, el contrato social, pero al mismo tiempo cambien la estructura y tengan política industrial y también el tema ambiental. ¿Y cuáles son los fundamentos de una política de ese tipo? Porque pareciera que están todos groggy con lo que está pasando, y estamos todos groggy, pero seguir investigando, teniendo fundamentos sólidos en la presentación de cómo construir políticas progresistas, me parece muy importante. Este trabajo Giovanni va a presentar, lo presentó a Berlín, y nada, yo le voy a dar la palabra a él. La idea es que él pueda hablar 1 hora, 45 minutos, y después preguntas que pueden ser en español o en inglés, y la idea es que se pueda discutir sobre eso. Y si hay un momento, me gustaría que Giovanni nos contara, porque sé que van a tener, cómo hicieron un instituto de prestigio como el que tienen a nivel internacional, cómo lo lograron hacer en 25 años, o sea, cómo fue el mecanismo, en qué trabajaron, cómo trabajaron con los jóvenes, qué se pusieron ellos como objetivo para conquistar una cosa de este tipo. Ellos, por ejemplo, quiero decirlo, tienen recursos que llegan porque en Italia no existe financiación si no competís en Europa, y en Europa competís con todos los institutos europeos. Y ahí es todo blinded. O sea, ninguno sabe quién son, ni cómo el instituto gana porque publicó un tanto ahí, tiene tanto index, tiene tanto esto, tiene tanto lo otro, la publicación está. Y solo se ganan así los proyectos y muy no hay ni comité ni nada que uno pueda en algún modo manejar. Así que es bastante duro el proceso. Y la selección de los jóvenes y la beca lo mismo. Entonces, para que viniera, la altura le complica un poco, bueno, pero gracias por haber venido. Creo que hay mucha gente que pasa por América Latina, pero hay poca gente que viene a América Latina, le deja el cariño, trabaja, viene a estas reuniones, está con los jóvenes, los sigue, se los lleva hacia afuera. Él se ha tenido un montón de jóvenes que han pasado de acá en otro lado a estudiar ahí. Así que gracias, Giovanni, la palabra y el floor es tuyo.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I must apologize because I speak in English. I mean, I know some portuñol for a conversation, but not enough for learned speech. You can ask a question in Spanish, and I will understand, but speak is another method. Now, today I will try to take you through a sort of diagnostic of a polycrisis, the current state of affairs. A crisis that is economic, but also social, political, and environmental. Before beginning the analysis, let me tell you briefly and telegraphically the type of perspective that I'm...
¿Se escucha? ¿Y cómo se puede subir ahí? ¿No tienen modo para subirlo?
Do you want to...
Esto.
I'll do this. Okay.
Tienes que comprar.
The type of perspective, the type of spectacles that one has to take in the analysis. Well, one that one has not to take is an analysis centered on production function of whatever kind, to which you add, I don't know, the rule of law, to which you add culture, but always trying to squeeze it in an invariant function. This is good to get the Nobel Prize, but it's bad to make actual historical analysis. The framework that we developed with Chris Freeman long ago is based on the contrary on an idea of congruence or mismatching between 5 domains. The first domain is the scientific, the generation of new knowledge, of new scientific knowledge, and its diffusion. The second is the technological domain, that is innovation, imitation, adaptation, diffusion. The third is the economic machine, what we normally call economics, that is production, distribution, consumption, trade, balance of payment, etc. The fourth are the political and legal institutions. And the fifth is the domain of culture, norms, collectively shared vision of the world. When I say that there are 5 domains that are dynamically coupled, it means exactly that they influence each other, but each one has got logic of its own. So you cannot reduce it to a single system. You have 5 coupled systems. Well, if you want to know more, come on Monday on this thing. And in any case, you can find a whole chapter 2, in the manual that I'm going to present Monday. I think there are 3 existential challenges to contemporary society. First is I'm talking about the fundamental premise. I'm talking about primarily developed OECD countries, the old OECD countries, but 80% of this consideration apply even more so to emerging economies. even if the focus is going to be especially US and Europe. Now, the first challenge is the complete rupture of the social pact that characterized the 3 decades after World War II. The second is more technological, is the deepening of information technology, digitalization, intelligent automation. We see how intelligence is intelligent, and the effect that has on social relation and on labor relation. The third is the climate crisis. That probably we have reached a tipping point, or we are very near it. Now, I think it's useful to begin where it all began, the glorious 3 decades after World War II. You can see well there the matching. On the technology side, you had the rapid growth of new technologies, relatively new, say near maturity, but were still new, essentially associated with consumer durables, cars, TVs, fridges, and a corresponding increase in the productivity associated with Taylorism and the electromechanical automation of production. You had a nearly full indexation of wages on productivity. This is fundamental, and it is a specific feature of the last of these first 3 decades. Symmetrically, on the consumption side, you had the workers that for the first time were able to buy the things that they were producing, the car, the fridges, the television, and all this under a regime of benign macroeconomic management, with pushed in Europe by the reconstruction, in the US by military expenditure, but also some social and infrastructure expenditure. Together, you had what you could call optimistic animal spirits on the side of the capitalists. So you had an accelerator, more demand, more investment, etc., and also an autonomous part due to investment in innovative opportunities. The social elevator was more or less working, very, very imperfectly, but it was working. And all that made up on the socio-political domain what you could call a social democratic or New Deal pact. The first, and to my knowledge, the last time. An essential part of it was the full commitment to full employment, and that was characterizing the right, the left, all the government of the West. I'm talking about Italy is a bit of an exception. I'm not going to talk about Italy, because Italy entered in this regime very late and went out more or less the same time. So the window of the New Deal window of Italy has been much shorter. Another aspect of this socio-political regime was the fact that it was taken as a plain truth that the economy was a mixed economy. I suggest you to reread Andrew Schoenfield's Modern Capitalism, written in the middle of the 60s, and the idea that even normal goods could be produced partly by the state. And of course, all services, all activities that at the time, at least in Europe, were increasingly considered universal rights. Health, education, decent pension. And that was a domain that it was obvious that the market did not enter. Think of the difference with today. All that was financed by a highly progressive taxation. I remember a conference in the States in which, with a somewhat strange audience, made mainly of military people, and they asked, but do you know that you had a communist president? And everyone looked at me, you are crazy. I said, no. General Dwight Eisenhower had the marginal rate of taxation, on personal rate of taxation, at 92%. The investment was the highest of the American history. This applies, what I said, applies only marginally. The pact does not affect the emerging economies. It affects the developmental commitment, affects Korea, Taiwan, and in an awkward way, Latin America. But in Latin America, there's never been, to my knowledge, the social pact that I was talking about before. In fact, I think it was a Mexican friend of mine that long ago told me that Latin America is too far from God and too near the United States. And the consequence was also that what was in Europe a relatively benign imperialism, in Latin America was not so benign at all. And that was a major obstacle, of course. If you simply look at the list of coup d'etat organized by the Americans, tells you the entire story. Also in Italy, something like that happened, but on a much smaller scale. Now, how all this ended in Europe? Social conflict obviously was there. And something that is important, nature continued to be disregarded, as Bas Brock puts it, consider only a source and a sink, where you could throw all the shit that humanity produced. And also on the side of policies, you still had, despite the social democratic compromise, you still had what Dick Nelson in the 70s called the moon and the ghetto problem, in the sense that it was easier to send people on the moon than solving the problem of the ghettos. And then that became even more serious. In any case, this compromise was there for 30 years or so. It blew up essentially for internal reasons. Because conflict, expectation increased more than what the system could deliver. And so social conflict increased. Capitalists and a good deal of the middle class, they said, well, in that case, if we cannot buy social peace and the continuity of the system in this way, we better go back to the liberal authoritarian ways of the 19th century. That was the pessimistic analysts like Kaleski were forecasting it in the early 40s. They were saying, look, there is a fundamental incompatibility, long-run incompatibility between capitalism and full employment. Essentially due to the fact that when you're getting near full employment, the capitalist control is crumbling. After a while, the Soviet Union fell. Now, the Soviet Union was a silent threat against the most wild behavior of capitalism left to itself. I mean, if you had in the 1950s an income distribution between wages and profits that you have now, even the workers of Detroit would have become communist, I think. So it was had a taming effect on the wildest, most disruptive attitude of capitalism left on its own. At the same time, you had an increasing deindustrialization. Fast in the US, slower, almost non-existent in places like Germany and Sweden, but you had it. You had globalization. If you want to date the beginning of globalization, is the end of the Bretton Woods regime, the Plaza Accord, the Plaza Agreement in 1971. That led to a push toward a liberalization, first of all, of finance, followed by the globalization of production. First of all was a globalization of finance, and with that later came, of course, the Washington Consensus, you should not have capital control, etc., etc. All this implied that the states lost the ability to manage monetary and fiscal policy. So you had essentially a progressive delinking between economic power that was truly multinational. I mean, the capitalists are truly internationalists and not the workers. This is the communism of capitalism. While the state was shrinking in its power and also in its stability, because it was hollow from within progressively. For independent reason came the Chinese industrialization that accelerated the Western deindustrialization. But don't think that the Chinese industrialization is the cause of all that. The Chinese industrialization is the outcome of a successful policies in which industrial policy had a major role, and in fact, the big successes that came after the opening up of the Chinese economy were based on the capability, the competencies, the collective capabilities accumulated during central planning. Do not forget that China, despite industrial revolution, etc., succeeded alone, even without the Soviet Union, to build an atomic bomb in the early 60s. So you cannot say it's China's fault. It is an internal dynamics of Western capitalism. Now, within that, also the power relation within capitalism itself changed. And you had a progressive transfer of income and power from the real economy, that is capitalist, that produce something, no matter how intangible it is, and finance that produces itself. Produces rent. And the increase of the share of profits is essentially an increase for 80 to 90%, an increase in the share of rents, financial rents, the old rent à la Ricardo associated with real estate, but also rent stemming from the fact that the old boundaries between what is marketable and what is not changed in favor of the market. So you had public goods, in fact universal rights, that were privately appropriated. Think of health. In the US has never been totally public, but in Europe it has been. And the boundaries shrank of the public. Education, pension, all these became sources of rent. Knowledge, you can date with the Bayh-Dole Act 1980, the beginning of a story of a hardening intellectual property right, also on public financed research, that before it was not possible. And this yield an increasing share of IPR going to a small group of multinationals. In the book that Mario was citing on industrial policy and development, and the subsequent book on IPR and development, we study that, and we argue extensively that a tightening of IPR is harmful, very harmful for developing countries. But it's harmful also for developed countries. And in fact, the rate of innovation has fallen. The rate of patenting has increased enormously. But the rate of innovation has fallen. I've studied extensively the pharmaceutical industry. You can see a paper, Dosi et al. On structural change in economic dynamics. And that is impressive, because if you calculate innovation as the number of new chemical entities approved by the Food and Drug Administration and the number of patents, the new chemical entities are of the order of 50 per year. The patents are various thousand per year. And these are all sources of rent, and they are defensive devices. How long do I have?
10 minutes.
I need more. Well, all that comes with an emerging technological revolution, question mark. Comes with a deepening of informatization of society, and the convergence between so-called artificial intelligence and automation. Whether artificial intelligence is intelligent, I don't believe it. It's very stupid. In fact, a robot, up till now, cannot clean a toilet because it's an information-rich activity depending a lot on local heuristics. Artificial intelligence can substitute easily a financial analyst. Political economy, quarterly journal, you have articles like the economics of suicide, the economics of organ selling, an equilibrium model of torture, anything. Because neoliberalism, supported by the technicalities of classical economics, is an overall religion. What is impressive is how the ruling classes absorbed it, and also the social democratic left absorbed it or betrayed the old commitments. I mean, you had the Clinton, the Blair, Hollande, the second Mitterrand, etc., which I call, in a not very politically correct expression, neoliberalism with Vaseline. But it's neoliberalism, still. Now, with that comes the complete rupture of the social pact, in which fraternité, égalité disappear from the political discourse, and liberté is essentially economic freedom. And I mean, you have people in economics, but also in political science, that go around saying, we have got preferences, how you had the preferences, the median vote, and all this type of bullshit. That is based on, this is the learned version of Margaret Thatcher saying, society does not exist, only individual. But notwithstanding neoliberal and their pathetic imitation by the post-social democrat, the post-left, human beings, all of us, we are much more social. Maybe we belong to many we, but once upon a time there were we workers, they capitalists, and there were us and them. Now they told us that there is no us and them because there is these anonymous people, individuals, but this creates a void. The void is filled by the authoritarian right. Authoritarian right that is some sort of authoritarian liberalism, in which on the economic side is the extreme version of neoliberalism. Think of Musk in the White House, or Millet with the sword. On the contrary, it discovers a perverse version of fraternité. It is we, true Americans, we, true Italians. They are the immigrants, they are the communists, the deep state, the opposition, the gays, anything that is they. and except the capitalists that are part of us, of course. This is the picture. It's not a very nice picture. What to do? Well, one needs to rediscover social conflict. One needs to bring back in the political discourse liberté, also in the sense of freedom from hunger, freedom from destitution, right to a decent health care, égalité, fraternité, bringing back into the political discourse these three elements together, but obviously the true they, don't agree. I was at a meeting with Joe Stiglitz, organized by Joe Stiglitz in New York a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying similar things. Joe said, but yes, with our think tank, we try to convince the capitalists that maybe it's also in their own interest to change. I doubt it. I really doubt it. I mean, one has got to rediscover conflict and organize conflict. Of course, liberté, égalité, fraternité means also bringing back the boundaries of markets. Redesign, propose, it's not from today to the next, have the rediscovery of, say, universal health as a right, not as something that can be sold or bought. And we need to change all the discourse. I mean, in normal language, you say the demand for health services, the supply of health services. Then, of course, you draw a line. In economies, if there is supply and demand, you draw two lines, and what is the intersection of these two lines? The equilibrium price, no? No. These are universal rights that cannot be discussed. Another major domain is bring back the loci of political decision to the representative of the people. Relink the decision-making with popular representation. Especially in Europe, this is tragic, because you have national authorities that count less and less, and you have a bureaucracy, a technocracy in Brussels that is not accountable, has never been elected by anyone, and counts more and more. And remember, the American Revolution began with the idea no taxation without representation. And we would like to have the same, to regain representation, even at the cost of blowing up this strange animal that is the European Union. We need massive policies, including industrial policies written large, to have a green, just New Deal. And people have got to begin nationally, because if one says, but this has got a major international dimension, this is a perfect recipe not to do anything. Yes, there are many international dimensions, of course, but begin to do your own. And we need to rediscover the sense of urgency. This green, just New Deal has got to have the urgency of a war. And war and markets do not match with each other. 3 months after Pearl Harbor, the American economy became basically a Soviet-like planned economy, because war are things that are too serious to be left to the market or to cost-benefit calculation. When Nixon decided to build the National Institute of Health, in order to win the resistance of the Congress, said, we declared war on cancer. And if you declare war on cancer, cost-benefit analysis does not hold any longer. In fact, one of my suggestions is abolish entirely cost-benefit analysis from the discourse. Someone has got to pay for it. Reintroduce massive progressive taxation. And there are ways. It's not that now with capital that is footloose, you cannot tax Google or Facebook or whatever. You can. Depends on whether you want or not. And if you see the behavior of the European Union vis-à-vis the aggressiveness of the Americans, you see that there is no willingness whatsoever to resist. What about emerging economies? I think that this, what I said, applies largely to emerging economies also. The fact that globalization has been broken by the power that basically built it can be in principle an opportunity to reconstruct a local trade zone supported nationally by heavy industrial policy that I was talking about before, that get around the globalization. Essentially has been an obstacle to development everywhere, unless you had non-market friendly policies like China. Then it became an opportunity, but that was the globalization plus the heavy non-market friendly policy, not globalization as such. With all that, needless to say, comes the need for capital controls, the restoration of the monetary and fiscal power of the states. That is even more urgent in developing countries than in Europe, even if it is also in Europe. BRICS are an occasion of building up an alternative, partly alternative circuit. Again, this engineering of international relations cannot come without profound social and industrial policy that, in very different version, of course, but rediscover the Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité Pact. In that, let's not forget the climate change, in which tackling the climate change is a win-win urgency. It's not a luxury that when you are developed you can afford, if you are developing you cannot afford. Of course, that should entail some transfer of resources from the developed country to the developing one. Right now, what happens is again to a country, the transfer of pollution from developed country to developing one. And we have an estimate of the degree of shade transfer, and one of the reasons why developed countries have become cleaner is because they export the dirt. Anyway, I end up with a question. Who's going to do all that? Now I think it's our task to reach the government, the public, the political domain when it is receptive. I mean, in a country like Italy, it's useless because it's not receptive. I mean, it's like and to reach social organization able to bring about a change. Very difficult in a world in which there are no workers any longer, at least in Europe. No, there are, but many are precarious or not in factories any longer. But we need, and I'm repeating myself, to organize an opposition that might become hegemonic in the future. And
thank you. Bueno, gracias, Giovanni. Bueno, creo que tenemos una visión, un modelo, yo lo vería como un modelo, una interpretación, un modelo. Lo que me parece importante la contradicción del modelo, cómo funciona, salario, ganancias, el tema de la propiedad intelectual, cómo funcionó la distribución y cómo funcionó todo eso a partir de 30 años de estabilidad. Pero abrimos a las preguntas, libres de preguntar lo que quieren, y en español y se traducen. Y veamos, sin miedo y adelante. ¿Quién?
No necesita traducir.
No necesitan traducir, lo responde. Vamos. Federico, Gabriela, Roberto y Federico. Sí.
No.
Bueno, gracias Giovanni por pasarnos por todos los problemas que estamos viviendo en el mundo en las últimas décadas y a los que llegamos hoy, a la situación que llegamos hoy, ¿no? Pero cuando yo escucho los problemas del mundo en sus distintas dimensiones, están lejos de América Latina. Porque América Latina es desigualdad, ¿sí? O sea, los problemas reales de América Latina todavía no están vistos, no están incluidos en esa visión del mundo, porque es una visión del norte global, no hay vuelta. Entonces, el mismo, recuerdo cuando hace unos años salió lo del Green New Deal. O sea, es difícil de implementar en el mundo, pero aún más en nuestros países, es como los ODS, ¿sí? O sea, nuestros países tienen otro problema, tienen los problemas de la pobreza, ¿sí? Y entonces es difícil plantearse incluso cómo atender el compromiso con el cambio climático, lo cual es dramático, ¿no? Y es una realidad. Entonces, cuando uno mira la teoría de la innovación y las respuestas que la teoría de la innovación ha venido dando, bueno, no están nuestras voces del sur. No están también por culpa nuestra. En mayo, acuérdate cuando hace unos años decíamos, hay que pensar cómo construir nuevamente desde el sur, nuevamente la teoría del desarrollo. Y no lo hemos hecho por muchos problemas. Se han hecho muchos esfuerzos, se ha avanzado, no es que no se haya avanzado, se han hecho muchos esfuerzos, pero no tenemos las condiciones como para hacer un esfuerzo sistemático que permita dar una respuesta, ¿no? Entonces yo me pregunto también, ¿no? Cuando cambie el imperio y dentro de, no sé, 2 décadas tengamos a China, ¿será diferente? O sea, se mirará más del mundo desde el sur cuando tengamos a China, porque bueno, China es parte de país, pero al final va a ser un imperio. Y entonces el mundo va a ser, como el extranjero va a ir mejor, si a Tailandia y a Vietnam, que está al lado de China, o si al al sur, se van a oír mejor nuestra voz.
¿Hacemos una, dos y tres o una por una?
1, 2, 3, 3.
Roberto.
Gracias. Una pregunta. La gran pregunta, después de escuchar el recorrido hacia el abismo, digamos, es cómo la movilización colectiva ante estas tres grandes emergencias, el resquebrajamiento de los valores de Occidente que emergen de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. México está lejos de ello. América Latina está lejos de ello. La construcción de una respuesta de la innovación justamente para contender con ellas. Y la movilización para una fiscalidad que se comprometa con el New Deal verde que propone. Pero ¿cómo se imagina Giovanni, aún para los retos de Occidente? Dejemos de pensar en México y América Latina un momento. Aún para los retos de Occidente, ¿cómo lograr esa movilización colectiva?
Agrego dos preguntas más. Entonces, como esto mencionaste estos dos escenarios, Blade Runner, el más optimístico que iniciamos para como posible evolución de estos dos cambios, ¿no? La ruptura del pacto social y el cambio tecnológico. Con respecto al segundo escenario, más optimístico y que iniciamos, por así decirlo, mi idea de fondo, bien entiendo prácticamente la que se dice trabajar menos, trabajar todos, tener más tiempo libre para todos, como tú mencionabas en tu ponencia. Esta idea se asocia, si entiendo bien, por ejemplo, a una política pública como el Universal Income, el ingreso único universal, un ingreso mínimo para todos. Mi pregunta es si una medida de este tipo, en este escenario, no tiene como riesgo asociado aumentar esta ruptura del pacto social en el sentido de que se crea un grupo de gente, de trabajadores pobres, que, o sea, la idea de la movilidad en los 30 gloriosos funcionaba en la sociedad del trabajo, a la identidad de las personas que encontraban a través del trabajo, las investigaciones. Entonces, mi pregunta va hacia una política de este tipo si no tiene un riesgo asociado de aumentar esa distancia y debilitar las organizaciones del trabajo. La segunda pregunta mencionaste sobre la importancia de este cambio de fortalecer el rol del Estado, mencionaste la política monetaria, un debate que se vuelve a escuchar en América Latina en particular en estos últimos tiempos sobre que cuestiona la autonomía del Banco Central, que con los grandes asuntos de estas décadas, ¿no? Hay países que vuelven a mencionar el hecho de la política monetaria sea autónoma respecto al gobierno. Quería saber qué opinas.
Giovanni, respondes a las tres después.
¿Sí?
Sí, hagamos estas tres, después si alguien más quiere preguntar otra.
Well, this would require another conference, but well, I'll start from how far went the reflection on innovation and development theory? I think it went far. I mean, I think that in the last 20 years, we clarified that the central driver of development is capability accumulation. Organizational capabilities, technological capabilities, This is the book that Mario, myself, and Stiglitz edited. And I think this is a change in perspective vis-à-vis how much we invest, what is the debate also central to the classic development theory of the 50s and 60s. We need to bring the saving rate and the investment rate higher. Yes, maybe or maybe not. I mean, the new estimate of the Industrial Revolution in England showed that the rate of investment did not increase very much during the Industrial Revolution. In fact, I mean, catching up in information-intensive technologies generally implies a fall in the capital-labor ratio because electronic capital goods are extremely cheap. So the physical ratio that was the old development theory central question, saving investment to GDP, I think is the wrong focus. The right focus is how you accumulate capabilities. And in fact, I mean, China is a good case to the point of a massive across-the-board accumulation of capability, technological and organizational capabilities. There is, I think, an invariance that is even with information technology, one needs to go through industrialization. People saying Africa can develop going to services. I heard it many times. I don't believe it. Latin America can develop through services. No. Because most of the services in developed countries are non-tradable. The only development that you can make is exporting maize and care for old people or sick people or babies. You don't have much high value add services that could drive a just growth. I think then the problem is how do you make industrialization with the presence of China? Don't forget that China is now a free trader. Becoming a free trader means that you won. England became a won and then became a free trader. Before it was not a free trader, it was mercantilist. The US and Germany were not free trader at the beginning. They were a developing country and they protected themselves. And they have heavy industrial policies. So the question is that this goes to have regional markets also protected not only vis-à-vis us, but also vis-à-vis China, with all the softness that the policy requires. But remember that Ethiopia, I was there a couple of years ago, Ethiopia is a high-wage country compared to China because wages in Ethiopia are 1/5 of the Chinese wages. But the probability is 1/20. So unit labor costs in Ethiopia are at least 5 times those in China. And this is the problem that many countries, including Latin American countries, that have got much higher wages than Ethiopia, thanks God, are facing. And within areas, I don't know, say Mercosur, an enlarged Mercosur, also with you, with Colombia, have to aim at industrializing inside, having some wall, but for the outside being also China, to some extent. And having industrialization inside. There is, even in developed country, there is the fact that you don't have an organized high-wage working class. You have it, but it's smaller in terms of size. The big challenge for emerging economies is to come in late and succeed in having a working class that is paid enough to pay to buy its own cars, to buy its own TVs, because at the end, our basket of consumption has not changed very much vis-à-vis 70 years ago. Yes, there is the telephone, the iPhone, but not much else. Internet that is free. You don't have such a share of high value added things in consumption. But still, people want to eat, of course, want health, want the car, and so you need to have a wage that is able to buy those things that are the product of industrialization. And if you import the cars, the fridges, the TVs from China, I don't think that you go very far. Mobilization toward what, with whom? I mean, if I knew exactly, I would not be here, but on the barricades. This is for sure. One needs to painstakingly analyze the composition of societies and where conflict is, where dissent is, and also where one can become hegemonic. I mean, there is a small part, a very small part, of real productive capitalists that is wary of the dominance of finance and the big giant of information technology. So one should reconstruct on new social subject the developmentalist state. Another big question, and again, I'm not sure I have a positive answer, is can the developmentalist state be democratic? I hope so. But history shows that development with democracy happened in continental Europe after World War II. More or less, that is it, Japan. After coming from a period, and it was not so democratic. How you can construct a developmental state together with a developmental bureaucracy? Because if you have got a corrupt bureaucracy, you don't go anywhere. Even if you've got the best-hearted politician, but with a corrupt bureaucracy, you don't go. How you can, if you inherited a corrupt bureaucracy, how can you clean it up? Again, I don't know. But this is an urgency. And the only way not to do it is to pass other laws. I come from Italy. The experience of Italy is let us increase the number of laws. The number of laws is typically an incentive to find ways around the law. Let's find the exception by which I can exercise corruption without calling it corruption. It's not it's a story of ethos. Story of ethos, of course. Historically, the good-hearted bureaucrats and competent bureaucrats were well paid, but were paid mostly in terms of status. The Napoleonic bureaucracy was well paid, of course, but well beyond the money that they were getting was je suis un commis d'État. I'm the state. I'm the continuity of the state.